Welcome, everybody, to the Press Podcast. My name is Joseph. What is the Press Podcast? What's it all about? What's the name about? Well, this is a podcast where we're going to get into things about the Bible, things about God, things about Jesus, things about the Holy Spirit. We're going to talk about who God is, what that means in our life. We're going to talk about the Bible. What does that mean to our life? We're going to do teaching. We're going to do studying. We're going to dig in to different topics. We're going to talk about world events. Almost nothing is off the table. In fact, the press is really about getting into things, pressing into them. I'm going to interview different guests. Some will be pastors, teachers, leaders in the community. Some will be just regular churchgoers, people that believe like me, and people that don't believe like me. I'm not afraid. I'm not worried. I'm not challenged by people that have different ideas and beliefs than me. Some may not even be believers in Jesus at all. It's going to be honest. It's going to be transparent. It's going to be real. If you are an atheist, if you're agnostic, if you're not sure, if you're searching for truth, if you're going through things in your life, if you're going through hard things, if you're in the press of life, this podcast is for you. So being that this is the first of the broadcasts, I figured we might as well get into who I am, where I came from, my testimony, how I am what I am today. Kind of the foundation. So I'm excited to tell you my story. I'm going to get into a little bit of it, just a little bit of it tonight. And then throughout the next number of broadcasts, I will put in little parts of my life. I will take questions. I want to remind you to hit the subscribe button to get a notification anytime that a new show comes up or I happen to do a live show. Leave a comment. Tell me where you're watching from. Give me a thumbs up. Now it's time to get into the press. So how I met Jesus. Well, here's the story. I grew up in a typical Canadian, upbringing. I'm the oldest, and I have a younger brother, younger sister. And, we went to church, maybe Christmas, maybe Easter, couple of times, maybe other than that, but not really very regular churchgoers. There were no real talks about God and Jesus in our home for a long period. My life, was kind of like a joker growing up. I didn't really do too well in school. Thought school was kind of useless for the most part, and I was going to be an NHL superstar. Most of my life, I grew up in Eastern Ontario, Ottawa, and so, started playing hockey. That was my world. Hockey. Wanted to be in the NHL when I got older. So those were kind of the things that were going on for me. For the earlier part of my childhood, we didn't have a lot of money. It was the 80s. It was hard times in Canada. And I think the interest rate was like 20%. So there wasn't very many people that owned houses. So we had moved around a little bit, and we finally ended up in Ottawa renting a house. And then, later my dad would tell me these stories, but basically what happened was my dad went to some real estate conferences thinking he was going to be a real estate agent, but then learned some different things about real estate, and it's called syndication. And, he would by chance meet this very large investor, and this investor liked my dad, offered him a job. And so literally in a couple of weeks, we went from the poorhouse to having money. And this really changed our lives. I was able to get involved in sports and do different sports camps and different things like that. We started taking vacations, all of these other things. We bought a house. We lived in a nice house. We lived in a really upscale part of Ottawa. There was oceans and mountains, and I knew there was this place called Whistler, and Blackcomb, which I had heard about because I was a skier. And so I was really excited to go, but it was my senior year of high school. Very hard thing to do when you're in your senior year. You all probably know that. So when we moved, it was tough. The school I went to was we moved to this area in West Vancouver, British Columbia, which is, per capita, some of the most wealthiest people live there. And we moved up into an even higher class part of West Van called the British Properties. And the British Properties is where basically the most wealthy in Vancouver live there, and a couple of other places, but mainly there. It's a community. So went to the school up there, and it was a little different for me because coming from Ontario, and we weren't like rich snobs or nothing like that. But at the school that I went to, the students were already driving Mercedes Benz. There was Porsches in the student parking lot. I mean, there were cars that were very nice, nicer than most of the teachers. This is the kind of school that I joined, and it was tough, at first, but joined the football team. And then the funny thing is the very first game of the football season, I was playing a back and never played football in my life before, but just liked, contact sports, played hockey a lot. So the very first play of the game, the running back runs right towards me, and somehow I get the ball from him and I take it back and nearly score a touchdown. And, everybody just went crazy. And I instantly became Mr. Popular, or, popular in the school. I was invited to all these parties and different things like that. And so that was kind of some of the things that were going on for me. Now, if somebody were to ask me, about church, about God, about those kind of things, I would tell you that I know about those things. I would say that I know God created the whole universe, and Jesus is his son. And, that's the way that it kind of goes. And if somebody were to say, do you know about church? Do you know churches? I would say I totally know about churches. They're a place where you dress up in nice clothes. You go sit down on a very uncomfortable pew, and you listen to some older gentleman give a talk, like a lecture about something, the Ten Commandments or something, some do's and don'ts, different things like that. You give an offering and then you leave. And maybe they would have a hymn from like a hymnal. I don't know if anybody knows those things, but there's like hymn books, and they would have a number on the side of the sanctuary. When you came in, there'd be like numbers of which, songs we were going to sing, and there would be a piano, maybe an organist, but that would be it as far as music. Every now and then, maybe there, like, for Christmas, there might be a violinist, but that was it as far as musical instruments at the church that I knew about and went to. And as far as I was concerned, I just assumed that was the way all churches were. So that's kind of my understanding of church. Now, back to the story. I'm in West Vancouver. So I graduate, and I, have a great group of friends that I've come to know and hang out with. And basically every week was the same. I would go to work during the week. On the weekend, I'd have a little bit of money. I would buy alcohol, cigarettes, and we'd go party. We'd go to an outdoor party, a house party, something like this. This was just the life that people that I was around did. And we thought this was awesome. So that was going on. And then there was an event that happened, and all of a sudden I lost all of those friends. And I was instantly like kind of really down, not really understanding things. So it was a really interesting time being without my best friends and literally doing everything with them to going now that, none of them even want to talk to me. I couldn't see them. I couldn't hang out with them. Couldn't do things that we normally did. And so I was struggling. And all of a sudden, some guys that I had kind of seen at a couple of parties, they saw me or whatever, and they were just chatting to me. And, these, now I've come to understand how these things work, but they could just smell fresh blood. They could smell like this guy over here. What's he doing by himself? Where's his friends? So, he came over to me. He was like, "Hey, buddy, what's going on? This and that. You should come out with us. What are you doing this weekend?" And I'm like, not a whole lot. He's like, "Well, you should come on out with us. We're going to go to a nightclub and we're going to have all this fun and different things. You could be my guest. And, what do you think?" Right. And I was, it was in a place where it was like, yeah, let's do it. Now, these guys, I didn't know a lot about them, but I knew that they were not the greatest people. But hey, you know what? They invited me out, so I went with them. Well, long story short, these guys were actual gang members of a gang in Vancouver, and a pretty big gang. And so eventually I became a part of the gang. They befriended me, they showed me value, they brought me in. And so, I was very low on the totem pole of, or, however you want to say it. I was not a big player in there, but I was part of the gang. And then all of a sudden now I'm doing things that I never thought I would do. I'm doing hard drugs like cocaine. I'm doing mushrooms, doing acid, crystal meth, different drugs that I had always stayed away from. Now I'm doing because this is what these people do, and so I want to be cool and I want to do what they are. And so and then I started doing things too that I never did before either. Crime. I started doing, you know, B&Es. I started doing all these crazy things, even though I'm this like good kid from this rich neighborhood. And this is just, where I was at. So I was involved with this gang for quite a while. And throughout being with them, I was kicked out of my house. So I moved in with one of the gang guys, one of my good friends. And, that was my kind of life. One morning, I woke up and I went out of my apartment to go call my girlfriend at the time. And as I was walking to the payphone, all of a sudden this SUV pulls up and these two guys jump out and they're like, "Hey, Joe, look, you're just the guy I'm looking for. Hey, we are such and such police and you're under arrest. You're coming with us." So I got arrested and I got taken back to their local jail, and I'm there, and they're doing their typical thing where they're just trying to shake me down. They're like, "Hey, we know a lot about you and your friends and what you guys have been up to. This could turn out one of two ways for you. This can go really good for you. You can help us and we can help you, or you don't want to help us and we can't help you, and then I think you're probably headed to jail or something like this," right? And they were kind of, painting this picture of what might happen to me. But in my head, though, I knew, like, first of all, I'd never had a criminal record in my life before. I never had any real interactions with police. And so I was kind of doubtful that anything was going to happen. And also at the same time, I knew that I had never really done anything with the gangs. Even though I'd been around a bunch of these different crimes, I was basically the getaway driver. That was what I did. So as they're talking to me, they start, having conversations. And in one of the conversations, they're like, "Well, you know, we know, you might as well talk to us. We've already got people that are kind of talking to us." And I'm like, "Yeah, sure, whatever." And then they started telling me some conversations that they had. And, all of a sudden now I'm hearing information that these cops shouldn't have known. There were specific details of conversations that I had with my close group of friends that they shouldn't have known. And this kind of threw me a little bit because the gang that I had, if you know gangs, they don't really like people that talk to the police, and things turn out bad for them. And at this point, I'd already seen some pretty rough things that had gone on. And this gang that I was a part of was trying to take over different turf from other gangs. And if you know anything about that, that's usually what they call kind of like a turf war or something like that. And so there was a lot of violence going on. And some of the guys that I used to hang out with, one of them was actually murdered in a movie at Donnie Brasco. He was watching Donnie Brasco with his girlfriend in a movie theater, and these other guys, they bust in and they shot him. They didn't. They ended up killing him, and it was all in the newspapers, all everywhere. And this wasn't the only attempt on his life. He was kind of like one of the head guys in our group, in our gang, and so they wanted to make an example of him. There's some other things that happened later on. I'll get into that about all these other people, but what I'm trying to just show you is that this was not just like a group of guys who were some buddies. We were a serious gang. And if I told you the name of the gang, you would know it. You could look it up in the information, but that's not the point of the story. So these cops are telling me things that they shouldn't know. So all of a sudden I'm thinking in my head, why am I going to potentially go to prison for doing nothing? I'm not even a hardened criminal. I'm not even a real gangbanger. I've got my whole life ahead of me. This is not really where I saw my life going. This is not what when I was thinking about my life. No, this was not what I was thinking about. And I had given up on my hockey idea because, when I had come out to BC, I was playing rep hockey, but, you realize very fast that unless you're a real superstar, the chances of you getting into NHL hockey was very slim. And so those had all come about. So basically all my whole, value in my life, wanting to be a hockey player, being smart in school, doing all these things, I had like no value. I had no nothing. And now I'm in this gang and things are just going from bad to worse. So I decide that's it. I'm going to leave the gang. I'm just going to, do some things. So my best friend who I was living with at the time, after I get out, they do release me, saying that they're investigating me, but no charges, So my friend picks me up, and we're, over the course of the next couple of days, I kind of lead on that I'm going to move back in with my mom, my family, and I'm just going to try to get a job and just see what goes on with that. And so slowly over the course of the next 6 months, I just kind of started hanging out with these guys less and less and less and less. And to eventually to the place where, I didn't talk to them very much at all. And so I got a job and I was working, and I moved in with a guy that I was working at for a little while. That, kind of went sideways. I got my own apartment. So here I am. I'm about 17, almost turning 18. And my dad calls me out of the blue and says, "Hey, there is this hiking trip coming up." And my dad had been a little bit of a hiker. And so, he calls me up and he says, "Hey, there's this hiking trip coming up. Do you want to go on it? And it's 7 days, and it's with this, this organization that I had, been with and done a camp before." And so, I kind of knew it was, it wasn't like what I was into at the time. So I turned him down. I said, "No, I'm not really interested in going. Thanks so much." At this time now, so this is about, 8-9 months outside of the gangs. And so I've reconnected with a friend from high school that I wasn't really good friends with, but we kind of connected somehow, and we started hanging out. We were like best buddies now. And actually I was working for him. He was a construction guy going to school to be an engineer. So I connected, I was working with them, and we were building houses in Squamish. And, he was in school at a prestigious university to become an engineer. So he's pretty smart. But when I connected with him, I brought all the baggage that I had, which was drinking, smoking marijuana, smoking cigarettes. And, he was a little bit into that, but like 5%. And then I took him, 90% more to the place that he actually, at this time he had dropped out of school, and because he just couldn't keep up with the demands of the schooling for becoming an engineer, so he dropped out. And then we were just working full time, working during the week, getting our money, going to UBC parties, university parties, frat parties, just doing the thing that we thought young guys do. That's what we do. And so his parents, I met them a few times. They didn't like me at all. They thought I was a very bad influence on them, and I was. And this is what happened. But so now we're back here again, and about 2 weeks after the phone call that I get from my dad, he calls me back again, and he says, "Do you want to listen? I want you to really think about coming on this hiking trip. It's a father-son trip, and it would I'd really like it if you'd come." And the thing about my dad, all throughout my life, my dad had been a really big supporter of me, no matter what kind of went on. If I was having trouble in school or different things, my dad always kind of was there to help me a little bit. And so, for whatever the reason, and I know the reason now, but at the time I wasn't, fully understanding. But I was like, you know what? Okay, what is this again? It's a 7 day, kind of hike thing. What we're gonna do is we're gonna go to this outdoor base camp, and then we're going to do day hikes and come back, and we're just going to have food, and it's all taken care of, and it's kind of in nature and stuff like that. And I'm like, okay, you know what, all right, father son trip, I'll go. And he says to me, he says, well, this is a Christian event. And I said, yeah, whatever. So the the organization that this camping event that was being, that we were going to go on, the organization is called Young Life Canada. And my dad was on the board of Young Life as in the fundraising area. And so, this was kind of a big deal. This is why he was put it back to me, because a lot of the other people that were on the board were going, and they were, it was going to be the men with the sons and different things like that. And so this is why my dad was really interested in going. And Young Life is a Christian organization. They basically do a lot of youth camps and different things like that. And I'd actually been on two youth camps with Young Life before. And so, I was like, okay, Young Life, yep, that's okay, whatever. And he's like, it's a Christian camp. And I'm like, I know, it's all good, whatever, that's fine. I know Christians, I know all that stuff. It's no big deal. And we were both smoking at the time, as I said, and even my dad was struggling with smoking. And he said, well, listen, why don't you and I make this as like a kind of a starting for us to take a break from smoking, because obviously when we're up there 7 days, we're not going to be able to smoke and different things like that. You want to do that? I'm like, yeah, let's do that. So that's what's going on. So you have to take a ferry to get to this camp. It's way up on a coastal part of Vancouver and British Columbia. And so we're on the ferry going up on this ride, and as we're going up, one of the leaders comes over, me and my dad and a couple of other people, we were sitting down, and he comes over and he points way up at, this high mountain. And he says, you see that mountain over there? And we say, yes. And he says, we're going to be up there in just a couple of days. Can you guys imagine that? And my dad was like, say what? Because so my dad was like, no, hold on a second here. And so then he went and talked to the leaders, and he's like, wait a minute, I thought this was just where we're doing day hikes and coming back to like the main base camp. I didn't, what are you talking about? We're going up onto this mountain. That you can't do that in one day. And the leaders are like, no, that, we're leaving the base camp day one, and we're not coming back for 7 days. We're going to hike up a mountain that's higher than Whistler and go sleep and camp on the glaciers, on this glacier. And My dad was shocked. And the leaders also said, and you're carrying a backpack, a 75-pound backpack as well. And so this was a big shock, to say the least, because my dad was very much out of shape. I was out of shape. We both had no idea that this was going on. But I was like, whatever. You know what? If these other people are going to do it, how bad can it be? But my dad, though, he was really not happy, and he kept on trying to talk to the leaders, saying like, "Listen, I can't do it. I'm just gonna stay behind. You guys go ahead." And they were saying, "You can't do this. It's a father son thing. You can't. It's not going to be that hard. Don't worry about it." And so they agreed that they would try to give my dad a lighter pack, and eventually he gave in to going. So on this trip, there was, a number of leaders, and this is how, Young Life does it. It's basically kind of like, they're trying to tell people about Jesus. And so one of the leaders was this younger guy, my age at the time, and he had long dreadlocks, white guy, really tall and skinny, and he was a different guy. And, he was the leader of the group. And he came over to me and he was talking to me, when we were getting our stuff all together, and they're kind of explaining how we're going to hike and what we're going to do. And what this hiking that we were doing is called no trace camping. And if you don't know anything about that, what that basically is that there are no trails. They don't want to wreck the environment. They don't want any man-made stuff, ruining the environment. So there's no trails. So, well, how are we going to hike? We're going to go up waterfalls, streams, water areas where there's already trails. And so not only are we carrying a 75-pound pack, our boots, everything is going to be soaked, and it's just going to be crazy. So this is kind of the scenario. So Darb comes up to me, this leader, this weird guy with these dreads comes up and he's talking to me, and, we're just over the course of talking. He's like, "So do you go to church?" And I'm like, I haven't been to church in a long time, but, I used to go to this church, on the North Shore. And, he's like telling me about his church, and he's like, he saw that I was kind of a skateboarder, and he asked me some questions. I'm like, yeah, I used to skateboard. I like skating. And he said he's a skateboarder, and that, at my church, this is him telling me, at my church, we have a half pipe at the church. And I was like, what? You have a half pipe at your church? It's kind of interesting. That's a little different. Okay, well, whatever, sure, I guess. So we get our backpacks and we're starting to go up, and each time we'd have a break, for lunch or dinner, the leaders would kind of go around and chat and build relationships with the crew. So there was about 14 of us on this trip, and so most of the people that were going had never done a serious hike like this, going way up in the mountains and then sleeping on glaciers, So it was a really neat environment, group of people. So the second time that or later, we're taking a break, maybe we're taking a break. And then, so Darb's coming over and talking to me again. And he says, another thing that, at our church, we have a rock band that does worship. And I was like, oh, okay, really? And he said, yeah, so we've got a guitar player, a bass player, drums. And, it's kind of like, younger style music. This is the songs that we sing and different things. And I was like, wow, this is really strange kind of church. I'd never really heard about this. And I was like, oh, well, okay. Maybe that's why you seem cool, because you're a church guy, but you don't seem like, one of those weird, religious type of people. So that was kind of neat just to hear, things about his church and different things like that. So we're continuing to hike, and We get to the top of the tree line, and basically the top of the tree line is where the oxygen content changes, and now trees don't grow anymore. So we get there, we camp, and the next morning we're going to be going, we get to the glacier part eventually of the hike. And when you're hiking and you're going on the glacier and it's no trace camping, we have to make our own path in the snow. And so the first person that goes has to top kick. It's what called top kicking is what it's called. And so basically that's where the first person has to kick down and pat down and tamp down the steps for each person coming after them to make it safe so they don't fall and they don't slip. And we had axes and we were all roped in, and they when we got close to the glacier, they gave us this whole training on what would happen if we lost our step or we'd fall. And so there was all these different things that were going on. So it was kind of, kind of interesting, but kind of cool, at the same time. So we're going up this glacier, and we stop, for a morning break, and Darb comes up to me. So why don't you take the lead? Why don't you start doing some of the top kicking? You feel like doing that? And I'm like, yep, sure. Sounds good to me. Why not? So we're all getting ready to go and different things like that. We're still chatting, and he's continuing to kind of talk to me about the things of God and Jesus and his personal relationship with Jesus, and trying to figure where I'm at and different things like that. And he says to me, I don't know if you know this, Joe, but Jesus is a personal God. And I'm kind of like, okay, what are you talking about? And he's like, well, when I pray I pray for specific things. I talk to him about specific things, and I get answers to my prayers. And I was like, well, okay, really? Okay. And he's like, yeah. And, so, and I just remember he talked to me about a number of different things, but one of the things he said was, sometimes when I feel sick or I have pains, I pray, and God takes away the pains, takes away, the sickness that I have. And I was like, say what? I really, now I'm like, this is strange stuff. Not only do you go to a really strange church where they have a half pipe and a rock band, which kind of sounded cultish to me, not like any church I'd ever heard of. You're now saying that you pray about things in your own life, and the God of the universe, the God who made everything, heaven and earth, who has lots of things going on, that he cares about what you have going on. And not only that, like, he helps you out. This is craziness. And he said, yeah, why don't you try something like that? Why don't you do something like that? And I'm like, what? You're on. I'm going to do it. You're going to look so foolish. You're going to look foolish. And he's like, okay. So I'm top kicking. We're going now back up the glacier. I'm top kicking away, and it's a lot of work. So basically, the person who's top kicking has to do 3 times the amount of work as somebody who's just hiking, because you got to, ram and pat each step. And you have to remember, I was out of shape, and I was a smoker, and this was a lot of work for me. And I remember that after about 3 hours of doing this, I remember my legs were just burning with lactic acid, and you guys know what I'm talking about. It was intense. And I remember just in my head, just as I'm walking, and I remember in my head going, God, Darb, this weird guy, this leader guy, he says that he talks to you and things, you listen. And you know what? So he told me to try. I'm going to do it. I've got this pain. Yeah. Take it away. Let's see what happens. Kind of. And I didn't even pray it out of my mouth. It was just a thought in my head. So later on that day, we finally get to the place of the glacier after about 8-9 hours of this. And I was leading basically the whole way, top kicking. We get to the top and we're sitting down having dinner and we're just all chatting to people about how beautiful it is up here and different things like that. And Darb comes over to me and we're chatting about the day and how was it and all this stuff. And he says, "Hey, have you thought about, that stuff I was talking to you about Jesus answering prayer?" And when he said that, all of a sudden it was like, my head exploded. 1,000 pounds of bricks fell on me. And I was like, what? Wait a minute. What's going on here? And I remember thinking back to that time earlier in the day when I had the pain in my legs. And I was like, wait a minute. When did the pain go away? When did that pain go away? What? I think the pain went away when I prayed. When I thought that thought in my head, it was almost scary, to be honest with you, because I had no pain in my legs at all. And I should have had pain. And so it was just a really strange thing. And I was like, what? And I'm kind of like, this is weird. And Darb I can't even remember what he was doing or thinking at this time, but it was just a very strange scenario. So over the course of being up on the glacier, they give you questions to ask yourself about your life and different things like that. And, it was just really, I began to see that my life was not going in the way that I wanted to, obviously, and that some big changes need to happen. How was I going to get those changes? How were things going to happen? It just seemed like everything I was doing was just working bad. So up there, different things are going on with my heart and all this stuff. And Darb, this really neat guy that he just seems really down to earth. And, when he talks to me about his relationship with Jesus, it's different. It's different than a lot of what I had seen and heard growing up all throughout the times that I've been to church and the people that I had met at church. And it was something was happening. So we climbed down the mountain all the way down to the bottom, and it's the last night of this camping trip. And we're sitting around a fire, and Darb comes up to me and he says, "So, Joe, what do you think? What do you think about this? What do you think about all this God stuff? Where are you at? What's going on?" And I was like, I think I want to get to know Jesus like you know him. Like this thing with the pain in my legs going away, with my life, all of these things, there was something going on. And I really felt this weird, thing coming over me. Like, this is what I want to do. And so, he's like, okay, well, why don't we pray and I'll introduce you to Jesus and then you just tell him what's on your heart, real simple. So I was like, yeah, let's do that. So he started praying and he basically was just like, Jesus, this is my new friend, Joe, and he's interested in who you are. You've maybe been working on his heart and he wants to talk to you. So he's going to talk to you. And so I just prayed I just prayed, Jesus, I want to get to know you. I am now beginning to see that you are real. You're not just this kind of idea, but that maybe there's something real about who you are. And I just want you to come in my heart. I want you to come in my life. And I just want to get to know you. And When I was done praying, we were around the fire, and all of a sudden, these waves of heat were just coming like right over my body, kind of coming from my feet and going right up to my head, and just waves of heat. It was really, really powerful. And something happened to me. Something happened to me at that fire that night. I was radically changed. The person that I was just hours before was no longer anymore. I met the God of the universe, and he filled me and touched me and changed me, and I became a new person. I went to sleep, woke up the next day, and I really did feel like a different person. I felt like my life was clean, like the people say that the slate was clean. All the things that had gone on in my life, the hurts, different things, the letdowns, the sins that I had done, different things. Like, my concept of all this stuff was very, infant like. But I knew something powerful had changed. On the way back on the boat ride, it was almost like I was looking out and things looked different. Like the ocean looked different. And I was thinking about my life growing up, and I just felt like I had been shafted. Like, why didn't somebody tell me about Jesus before? And I got a Bible and I was reading it, and, just crazy things. Born again. That's what it was. I was literally felt like a brand new person. So I get back from the trip and I connect with my friend who I work in construction with, and he picks me up and he says, "Hey man, listen, I got some good weed here. Let's get high. We're gonna go to do some stuff today." And I'm like, you know what? No, I don't. I'm not interested. And so here's the craziest thing that happened too was yesterday, that day before, when I prayed and I was born again. All of a sudden now, this desire for me to get high, to drink, to do all these things, it was just gone. I didn't actually pray for it. I didn't even know how to pray or what to pray, but it was gone. And so when he asked me, "Hey, let's get high," I was like, "You know what? No, I'm good, man. I don't want to do that." And he kind of looked at me like, "Huh? What? What are you talking about?" He's like, "Come on, man. You're just crazy. Let's get high." And I'm like, "No, buddy, I don't want to get high anymore, man. I'm good. I don't need it." And he was like, "So what are you going to do, man? What's going on with you?" And I began to tell him about this trip and this guy Darb that I met and all of these weird things that happened to me. And, over the course of the next couple of hours hanging out with him, I'm like, you know what? I think what I want to do is I want to tell people about Jesus. I want to share what's happened to me, because I think if people knew about this Jesus like I know, that their lives would be different. And he was just so confused. Yet he and we no longer were friends anymore after that. He couldn't handle what was going on with me. And I literally, really, all I wanted to do was to read the Bible. I wanted to pray. I wanted to get to know Jesus and whatever that meant. So what had happened to me was I was going one way in my life, thinking things were going to go this way. And then everything changed and I was going a completely different way. I started going to church. I started being involved in youth, and I started just doing anything and everything around the things of God that I could. And so at this time, I was going to the church that I had previously gone to a couple of times with my parents, and this was a Baptist church, good Baptist church. And so the minister that was the pastor was a theologically trained seminary graduate. And the pastor, he would be up and it would be communion time. And he would be, we're so thankful that Jesus has taken all of our sins away. And I would be like, yes, thank you, Jesus, thank you. And people around me would be like, oh, some of them almost have a heart attack or something like that. It was just crazy. And I wasn't trying to draw attention to myself or do something strange. I had just been that radically touched by Jesus. It had changed my life. And now anytime, even during worship, I would be impacted. I would be, I would cry. I would be touched. I was excited about the Bible. I was excited about the scriptures. I was honored to pray. It was like this whole new world had been opened up to me, and I just wanted it all, and it was so good. I remember a couple of times different people coming up to me, and they would say, Joe, it's so great that you've got this fire for Jesus. This is so great. And, I really hope that it never goes away. And it was really strange that I was like, goes away? What are you talking about, goes away? It's very strange. And I didn't really understand it. So a couple of months went on and I got baptized, and eventually, after about 3 or 4 months of going to this church, and I was beginning to lose my passion. I actually was contemplating going and hanging out with my old friend and, smoking weed and drinking and maybe going to the bar or something like that. The thoughts were beginning to kind of be entertained, and it was almost, it was very strange. And a friend of mine at the church came up to me. She came up to me and she said, hey, Joseph, and on a side note, that's another thing that I forgot to share with you guys, was that, growing up all of my life, I wanted to be known as Joe. I hated Joseph. Joseph was like this Bible name and boring and just was, this formal name that I really didn't like. And so I was just always known as Joe. But when I met Jesus, I now love that name for some reason. It clicked. There was a switch that went on, and I loved Joseph, and I wanted to be known as Joseph. And so that's who I am today. I'm Joseph. So back to our story now. So a friend of mine comes up to me and she says, Joseph, you may want to come to this meeting. I think this might be something for you because, she just knew who I was. I was really kind of excited about the things of God. And I'm like, okay, well, what are you talking about? She said, well, this meeting that's on Friday nights. And I was like, oh, a church that meets on Friday nights? That's really interesting. And people want to go? Because all I understood was that church was on Sunday morning and that was it. And she was like, yeah, not only do people go, but there's a lot of young people that go. And I was like, what? A lot of young people? Like, how many people are we talking about? And she said, well, there's probably 300. I said, 300 young people? 300 young people on a Friday night in Vancouver? This sounds like something I really want to check out. So I'm like, hey, listen, I'm thinking this is something I want to check out. And so she says, okay, well, it's happening in another couple of weeks. We'll go. And she's like, but it is a little weird at this church. And I'm like, okay, what does that mean? And she was like, well, they're very exuberant in what they do, and sometimes they use weird languages that I don't really know what they're saying and stuff like that. And I'm like, okay, weird languages and exuberance. Okay, that's interesting. I don't know, but I came from gangs. I've seen like crazy things that I haven't been able to share in this time with you. But like, I was like, you know what? I need something different. I need to try something different. Let's do it. Let's go. So a couple weeks later, this meeting is going on. So we go, and it's this really big church, and like really big. We go in there, and it's kind of like, the lights are kind of down, and on stage there's a band. Where at the church that I had been a part of, there was just a piano player, but on stage there was a band, there was a guitar, acoustic guitar, electric guitar, bass, drums, all this stuff, and it was all young people. The worship band was young people, and in the church it was filled with probably 300 young people. And as I'm looking around, I'm looking at these young people, and they are being very exuberant. Most of them had their hands lifted in the air, which I had almost never seen before. And a number of them were like on the ground, on their knees. Some of them were crying. Like, it was just a sight that was crazy for me to see. Young people, and this impassioned for Jesus. It was really interesting. And when I was standing there looking around, all of a sudden, that same fire that I felt come over me when I was born again, that same fire, those waves of fire that came over me when I was at the campfire, when I had first met Jesus, all of a sudden, I felt the fire again. And it was amazing. I in my heart, I'm like, this is where I need to be. This is my home. And that the meeting went on, and it was just a really awesome meeting, and I met so many people, and they just wanted to get together and talk about Jesus. They wanted to go out and witness and talk to people about Jesus. And it wasn't, parties and games and movies, which had been a lot of what my church experience had kind of been. These people wanted to pray. They wanted to read their Bible. They wanted to get together and do things of God. And so I went up to the pastor of the church, and I said, listen, wow, my name is so-and-so. And he's like, oh, this is your first time here? Yeah, this and that. Where are you from? Oh, from this church over here. And I'm like, listen, pastor, I want to come and join this church. I want to be a part of this church. What do I need to do? And he said, okay, well, listen, first of all, I'd like you to go to your pastor, and because we like to do things proper here. We don't need to, steal sheep and different things. And I didn't really understand all this concepts, but he said, just go to your pastor, tell him that you'd like to change churches, and see what he'd say. I went back to the pastor of the Baptist church, and I met with him, and I said, listen, I went to this other church, and I really feel like the same thing that I felt when I was born again, and I feel like I need to go to this church. And so I talked with the pastor. He said that it's a good idea, but first to talk to you to see what you say. And the pastor said, yeah, that's fine. That's fine with me. I figured you'd probably be leaving at some time, which was kind of funny. But anyways, I was like, great, good. So then I called the other pastor. I told him, hey, he said that's fine, that I can leave. And they welcomed me with welcome arms. And I was at that church for a long time. And that's kind of the beginning of my Christian life. And there's so many other things and cool things that I'll get into over the course of the broadcast. Maybe I'll do a part 2 to this, but that's how I began my life. That was the foundation of my life with Jesus.
you might be listening, you might be hearing this, that you don't know Jesus personally. Yeah, God made the universe, and yeah, but personally, like where I know him, no, I haven't experienced that, and you want to. You know what? I want to pray with you right now. I want to introduce you to Jesus. You'll never be the same. You'll never be the same. The old will go and the new will come. So let's pray. Jesus, to all those that are watching this right now, I do pray right at this very moment, you're speaking to them. For those that have never met you, for those that don't know you, I'm praying that their hearts open to you, that they would receive you, that you would come and make yourself known to them. Surrender your life to him. If that's you and you're listening, just pray a simple thing. Jesus, come into my heart. I give you my life, and I want you to come into my heart. I want you to come into my life. I want you to save me. I want to learn who you are and what you are. Amen. If you did that, if you prayed that prayer, I want you to put a comment, send me a message. I want to pray with you and for you and help you in your next steps, because there are next steps. Do my best to get those next steps going for you. So reach out to me and let me know.
Well, there we go. Episode 1 in the books. Thanks for joining me. Thanks for listening. We will see you all next time. And remember, stay salty, friends.